Ben Samaroo, CEO of WonderFi, is back with us with recent news out of the company. Ben, welcome back.
David, great to be here.
Let's start with the recent acquisition you've made. Tell us about that.
Sure. So just yesterday, we announced the acquisition of Coinberry, which is one of the few licensed crypto platforms in Canada. This comes a few weeks after we closed the acquisition of Bitbuy, which was the first licensed crypto marketplace in the country. And that was the first acquisition of one of these licensed platforms in North America. So it's a big milestone for the industry as we're moving towards this consolidation. And WonderFi is really at the front and center of that consolidation.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about Coinberry and why you decided to make this acquisition.
Yeah, absolutely. So Coinberry is founded in 2017, one of the leading platforms in the country, over 200,000 users. They did about just over 13 million in revenue in 2021. And they're really aggressively growing the business. And so we took a look at that and how that fed into WonderFi and into Bitbuy's business, and just saw it as extremely complementary. And what we're really doing here is the Canadian market is very fragmented. There's over 30 different trading platforms in the country. And when you have global players like Binance, FTX, and Coinbase that are looking to enter Canada, it's really hard for some of these Canadian platforms to compete at the size that they're at. And at the same time, it's hard for those Canadian platforms to enter into new markets given their size. So we saw this consolidation opportunity to really create a clear leading Canadian player to sort of lay stake in Canada and then be able to springboard into new countries.
I think as a crypto user, a lot of Canadians like myself are frustrated that a lot of big platforms don't accept Canadian fiat currency. So you got to convert to USD first, and then you've got to buy whatever you like on their platform using USD. So definitely, a Canadian acquisition of a Canadian company that allows Canadian fiat to be transacted in definitely helps. Tell us about the terms of this acquisition.
Sure. So the acquisition was for around $38 million in all stock. And it basically, the value of that transaction is at about 3 times the revenue of Coinberry over the last 12 months. So it's a really great deal for WonderFi, and I think Coinberry's stakeholders are very excited about it as well, because it puts them as part of a larger platform that can take part in the rest of this consolidation, and then growth into new markets, which is going to be the story for 2022 for WonderFi. And I guess just going back to your point about the user experience, what we're doing across all these different brands is creating single sign-on and unified access to WonderFi, Bitbuy, Coinberry, and all of the products and brands that come within that. And it's a really big pain point for people that are using crypto and DeFi, is having all these different accounts and passwords and keys that they're managing. So we're really rolling that all in to make it more seamless for people to access digital assets.
You know what just occurred to me? WonderFi maybe consider doing is in the future, just open it up to becoming an international shop. I mean, you already are, but consider that all fiat currencies can be used on your platform, and basically do what some of the larger exchanges should have done during their inception years, which is open it up to foreign users as well. Is that something you're considering doing?
Absolutely. I think if you have that built into the foundations of the company, it makes it easier to kind of scale into some of these new jurisdictions. Yeah. So I think it's a very good point. And to your point about having to use US dollars as a Canadian, that's actually where a lot of the highest fees is in that foreign exchange conversion that people get hit with. So it makes it really difficult for users and expensive for them to access. So yeah.
And your whole thesis here is helping the unbanked from emerging markets, right? So
exactly.
if somebody from Thailand, or I'm just naming some emerging economy, but if somebody from, let's say, emerging economy wants to participate in WonderFi, what's the process there? What's the on-ramp process?
So right now, the on-ramp is very simple for somebody in Thailand, for example, or anywhere in the world to be able to use the WonderFi wallet to transact. They can use fiat currency to get into any type of crypto and then transact through our decentralized wallet. What we're doing is expanding the centralized licensed business into countries like Thailand, Brazil, some of these developing countries, and then also some more established countries that have a need for a licensed crypto platform, just like Bitbuy was the first in Canada. where, there's a lot of interest from a bunch of different, geographies, South America, Asia, Europe, to issue these licenses and be able to allow their people to access digital assets. Because now, as they're becoming accepted as part of the economy, government and business in these countries want to, be able to facilitate use for their citizens.
Wait, so can you just simplify it? So if I'm in Thailand, can I use WonderFi right now or not?
Yes, you can. Yeah, you can. So you can use WonderFi if you have crypto, or if you don't have crypto but you want to on ramp through a credit card, and so then being able to expand the license part of the business basically means that we would explore banking relationships with Thai banks that would make it more seamless for people to do that might not have a credit card, because for the unbanked, a lot of people don't have access to credit. So we do service Thailand, but the next step would be integrations with banks in that country to make it so that people can do it in a more seamless and a cheaper way.
So just going on that example, so if I'm a Thai citizen, I've got Thai bots that I don't have a bank account, so I've got a bunch of Thai bots in cash. What's the next step for me?
So for somebody that's unbanked with Thai bots and cash, it's a bit of a there's more steps that are involved there. I think the digital wallet is something that is key because it doesn't require a bank account to be able to get onboarded into it. So you might be able to use like an ATM to be able to convert that into into digital currency, or look at other methods. But if you only have cash, then you need to go to a point of purchase basically to be able to exchange that into digital currency and transact. So that's
What do you mean by a point of purchase?
That would be like a physical, you need to go to a physical location, right? Because if you have cash in your hand, how are you going to get that into any type of digital without going in person somewhere?
Wouldn't I still need a bank account for our digital transaction to be made? I mean,
you can use so when I say a Bitcoin ATM or like a digital ATM, those are things that are and in Thailand, 7-Eleven, which is a much more expansive business in Thailand than it is in North America. They do banking, payments, like there's a whole host of services. That would be somewhere that you could at least on ramp into into something that's either digital bot or crypto.
Perfect. All right, the $38 million that you used to acquire Coinberry, was that all cash? Is that stock? How did you finance this?
We structured it as an all stock deal, so it's 38 million. As I mentioned, Coinberry, their revenue over the last 12 months was just over 13 million, so it's about a 3 times revenue multiple. So from the perspective when we look at competitors like a Coinbase or a Voyager and the multiples that they trade at, it's a very sort of accretive and good deal for us. So we're really excited about it.
Okay. When are you going to start acquiring things with only cryptos? $38 million worth of Bitcoin should be your next acquisition. When can we see that?
It's actually funny. We were thinking about that. It came up a little bit too last minute, so we were going to try and pull it off, but mostly all the lawyers were saying not a good idea. So maybe the next one we'll plan ahead a little bit more and be able to pull that off.
You've got to be a trailblazer in the industry.
I know. It's a good idea. It's a good idea.
Well, the lawyers seem to disagree with me, so kind of listen to the lawyers. All right, let's talk about the regulation side. So you mentioned to me offline, there's some developments on the regulatory front that you're watching out for. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. So there's been more clarity coming out of the US around regulation of digital assets. There hasn't been clear legislation, but definitely a direction where the US is accepting crypto as part of the economy and looking at ways to regulate that in a meaningful way. So that's a huge positive step for the industry. And what we're seeing is that other jurisdictions that haven't regulated crypto yet are now ramping up and preparing to regulate in a similar fashion so that they're able to issue licenses to some of the existing businesses that are in the crypto space in their jurisdictions. So everybody wants to be on par with the US. They don't want to be lagging behind. And so the US coming out with some guidance around that is very helpful, not just in North America, but globally.
Okay, but if you were a senator in the US and you had to pass legislation that's more crypto friendly, what would you do? Let's say your goal is to on-ramp the entire nation. So I think currently, depending on the survey you're reading, but For example, President Biden's latest executive order on cryptocurrencies that came out a couple of weeks ago stated that about 14% of US households have at one point traded or owned cryptocurrencies. That comes out to roughly 40 million people. Again, depending on the study, you're looking at 30 to 50 million. So let's say you've got the entire nation of 300 million plus. You want to on-ramp everybody. What legislation do you need to pass to make that happen?
Anything that provides a framework for how businesses can be compliant in offering crypto. That's the biggest hurdle, is that it's unclear if you're operating in the US whether you're onside or offside regulation. So that creates uncertainty for business, and it also creates uncertainty for consumers. They don't know if they're dealing with a legitimate business or not, if the government doesn't take a stand and provide clear regulation. So that is really what prohibits adoption, and why we're still at that percentage. And that also keeps out the investment community. Sophisticated institutional investors don't want to commit capital when it's not clear what the regulator is going to do. It also keeps banks out. So that means that it's hard for people in it can be hard for people in the US to even buy crypto with their bank account through a service like Coinbase, for example, because the banks want to be very careful. Canada is notorious for that, where Canadian banks have, in the past, and I think still to date, will block transactions if you're trying to buy crypto with your credit card even if it's through a licensed exchange, for example. So this regulatory clarity, all of that feeds into adoption.
Wait, I'm getting blocked if I'm buying crypto with my credit card in Canada?
It definitely happens, or credit card or e-transfer, for example. So if you if you bank with a big bank,
I've never bought cryptos with my credit card before, so I'm wondering how that even sounds like.
It sounds like really bad. It sounds like really bad investment advice, but it's more like so bank account or credit card. If you bank with one of the big banks and then you go to an exchange like Bitbuy, which is licensed by the Ontario Securities Commission, et cetera, there is still a good chance that the bank will block the transaction as soon as they see that it's associated with a cryptocurrency company. And that's more of a big bank policy thing. You can get by it, but there's definitely barriers there that are in place.
You know what's annoying is that I'm not going to name the exchange I'm with, but for a Canadian exchange that I'm using, I have to deposit my money through a bank first, a financial institution, then transfer that money to the exchange. That process can take anywhere between a couple hours to 2 business days was the longest I've had. And if I have to withdraw money, let's say I make a trade, I have cash in my exchange, I want to withdraw cash, that takes even longer. It's just annoying. I understand when can we see a crypto bank or perhaps even platform like WonderFi set up a platform such that I can just deposit my fiat currencies with you directly? So there's no lag. I mean, I understand I need fiat for my life, but let's say I want to, use your platform. I can just give you my cash, and then you can make that transaction on your platform without any lag. When can we see that happen?
So you need to open up an account at Bitbuy or Coinbase, because you can do that. These first licensed platforms do allow you to actually deposit money directly that will be held by the company, and then you can transact.
Is that legal though? What's the legal framework around?
It absolutely is. Yeah, and it's still fairly new. Bitbuy got the first crypto marketplace license in Canada in November 2021. So it's still fresh, but it's all insured, held by a third-party custodian, and it's overseen by the Ontario Securities Commission and other Canadian regulators. So it's very safe and compliant. So that's kind of the shift that's happening, which does make things a lot more seamless for people. So we'll have to get you set up with an account.
Okay, sure. Regulations are definitely moving towards the right direction in the US in terms of helping businesses adopt cryptos. But what about the education side? I feel like a lack of education is also the issue behind people not adopting cryptos at maybe a rate that one would expect, or maybe people are hesitant to adopt cryptos because they just don't understand. I'm not expecting 100% of the US or Canadian population to adopt cryptos ever. No. That probably won't happen until much further down the line, until we have a digital currency that we need to use. But in the meantime, if you were a legislator, again, how would you enact policies that could be informative for the public, that would help the public be educated in the world of blockchain?
Mhm. I think education is so important, and a lot of the education still comes from the crypto industry, which I think
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily always have the best sort of messaging for your average person, right? It's still people talking a lot of jargon. They've been in the industry for a long time, and it's just like any specialized segment like that. It's people are talking at a different level, and so I think having institutions like banks and insurance companies, some of the more traditional financial institutions that are now taking a step into crypto, taking part in that messaging and education is really important. And we're in conversations with a lot of financial institutions in Canada and in other jurisdictions where they really want to provide some sort of a crypto related product to their customers, and they're in active exploration phases there. So I think we're going to see a big step forward there in terms of some of these parties that have large access to customers and have a history of helping people with their finances, and really just introducing something light, right? Like part of the problem with crypto is people get overwhelmed because people will, if you ask somebody, hey, what should I invest in crypto, or how do I do this? They're going to like throw 100 different things at you, and you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm never going to do that. Right. So I think a more focused approach is really going to be helpful to educate people.
Okay, so I know you have a mandate to help the underbanked or the unbanked in emerging markets, but let's say I'm somebody in Canada or the US that it's more developed nation, and I've got cash. I'm not underbanked. I have a bank account, but I've got a lump sum of cash that I could either deposit into my savings account or go to a platform like WonderFi. What's your message for that person? I'm undecided as to whether or not I should be, dipping my feet into cryptos. I'm undecided whether or not this is going to help me financially in the long run. What's your message for me?
So I think there's two different areas to crypto or digital assets that we're focused on right now. One is trading, and so that's similar to trading stocks, and then the other one is yield, and that's similar to savings accounts. So the person that you talked about in this hypothetical, I would steer towards the yield side, and you look at what interest rate you could get from depositing that cash in a savings account at a major bank, and then you compare that to being able to own a stable coin which doesn't have price fluctuations like Bitcoin and earn interest on it. And at the present time, you're going to be able to get much higher return on that stable coin.
Okay, but I might say to you, Ben, no yield comes without risk. And so if I'm earning a higher yield than a financial institution, certainly there must be more risk involved, right?
It's a good point. Risk and reward are always correlated. The difference here is that in the savings account scenario, the bank is basically a middleman that is taking your funds and letting them out to other parties, and then that's really why the fees, the interest rate savings that gets passed back to you is cut down the middle. Not even cut down the middle. It's diminished down to basically nothing at this point. Whereas in this stable coin yield scenario, what you're doing is you're actually interacting with counterparties directly instead of having a bank as an intermediary. So that's the whole decentralization aspect. So but your point is right. As you start to ratchet up that interest rate that you're seeing in crypto, the risk definitely goes up. But I've seen
double-digit 20% APYs. What's up with that?
Yeah, I would just steer. I mean, personally, I would steer clear unless it's play money and you're doing it for experimentation or whatever. But I think the real.
Well, what's the risk there? Well, why would you stay clear? What's the biggest risk of, let's say, depositing a USDT with the platform and they offer 20% APY?
I think the platforms that you're seeing where you're getting 20% APY or more, there's a number of different risks involved. You got to think about like, how is that actually being provided? There's in some cases, there's a lot of different pieces that are involved. And if my sort of approach that I look at it is, if I can understand how the money is being made, then it's probably not a good investment for me to make or asset for me to access. So you'll see all of the sort of negative news that comes out of crypto and DeFi is always tied to some of these assets and protocols that have these double-digit APYs, and it makes sense because there's a lot of exposure points and issues with those.
Not to mention the platform itself could just go bankrupt and you would lose your cash. I don't know if you're insured or not, but yeah, I mean, you could lose all your all your deposits.
Exactly. Yeah. And what we're doing through Bitbuy, Coinberry, WonderFi, we're really focusing on those, more safe, secure opportunities for people. Everything's licensed and insured. It's really just a more safe entry point for your everyday user, rather than having a lot of these more advanced things that are not accessible for people.
Final point, I'll let you go. The Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates continuously this year, 6-7 times is the projection. What's that going to do to the crypto markets? We know what interest rates will do to the rest of the banking sector, in traditional finance and to stocks, but I wonder if crypto APYs will be affected at all.
It's hard to say at this point. I think there's a lot of different sort of views on how that will play out, but I think as interest rates increase, what we're seeing is there's definitely more interest in digital assets in general in crypto. So I think you are going to start to see potentially more inflow of capital into crypto.
When there's more inflow, will APYs drop or go up? Because presumably when the sector matures, you're talking about lending rates that will go down because there's more competitors entering the space.
Yes, I think that's fair to say for sure. And so that's why also some of the very high APYs are extremely risky, because they can, as more capital flows in, those are going to contract significantly. Right. Whereas some of the more reasonable, like 3 to 4%, while you're going to see some difference, it's probably not going to be that significant. Okay. So if you're using these tools as, medium to long-term tools for your savings, et cetera, then, it's a little bit more safe to do that. But at the same time, definitely the asset class is still very early. So, I think for most entry-level people, would not recommend putting, your life savings into any of these assets, right? It's still, there's still definitely risk assets, as is WonderFi as a publicly traded company. We're a risk asset, right? It's a venture company. And so I think that's still an important part of the education and the message, right?
I agree with you. I shouldn't put my life savings in one basket, but don't forget the guy that put $8,000 into Shiba Inu, and now he's worth $5.4 billion, that wallet. So
that's true. That's true. No risk, no reward. I mean, what are you going to do?
All right. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate your insights. We'll speak next time.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lin. Stay tuned for more.